these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, folks. It's a pleasure to have here Brigadier General Amir Avivi, and we're going to keep talking about the situation in Israel as it is ongoing, although we had some recent news that there was a ceasefire. So first of all, General, thank you for being on, and you're retired.
Your service.
I appreciate that.
I read your amazing resume. And,
Oh, yeah.
Really appreciate your service for your country.
We fluff it up a lot, So when did you retire from service? You recently retired?
Well, I retired 4 years ago. I served 30 years in the IDF. I joined the combat engineers, and I served in the Corps of Combat Engineers from a simple soldier to battalion commander. Afterwards, I was appointed aide-de-camp of the Chief of General Staff of Bogi Ya'alon.
Okay.
And then I had the chance to see things, on the more strategic level, cabinet meetings, Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and so on. Later on, I commanded an infantry brigade on the Egyptian border, which was a very, very busy border at the time, without a fence, and the movement of terrorists from Gaza into the Sinai Peninsula and into Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a very busy 2 years fighting terrorism on the southern border. And from there, talking about Gaza, I became a deputy division commander of the Gaza Strip.
Okay.
It was a very interesting
That's
time.
quite a job.
I got to be actually also a combat engineer officer in the Gaza Strip. At the time, the division was still inside Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And then I returned as a deputy division commander when the division was already deployed outside of Gaza. And I went back to the Corps of Engineers. I commanded the School of Combat Engineers. And as a Brigadier General, I was in charge of auditing the whole Israeli defense establishment, all of the IDF, the Ministry of Defense, and the military industries. And this was fascinating, by the way.
And when did you retire?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. Me too. So there was a ceasefire recently announced. What do you think about that? Should we have some hope there? And what would it take for that ceasefire to hold? Do you have concerns that it won't hold?
Well, we have to understand, first of all, what is Gaza and what's the history of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
We, in the past, for a long time, since the Six-Day War, we controlled Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Oslo, we left the cities inside Gaza. There were still Jewish communities in Gaza, but the cities, we completely left them and didn't operate in them at all. So, like the moment we left, they started building rocket factories, mortars.
It's important to note too. So what year did Israel completely pull out of Gaza? And you're literally removing Jews from their homes to leave Gaza, correct?
Yeah. So it started first before we moved Jews from their homes. We first of all we didn't want to control the Palestinians themselves. So in Oslo, in the peak of the peace agreement, we left the cities and the control passed to the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea was, let's see what goes in Gaza first and then proceed from there. But what actually happened is that the moment we gave the Fatah the cities, the first thing they did is started building military capabilities, started developing rockets.
Mm-hmm.
It took them something like 6 years to reach a large amount of rockets and capability. And 20 years ago, still with the communities inside Gaza and still with the IDF controlling the Egyptian border between Gaza and in Egypt, they started shooting thousands and thousands of rockets on cities in Israel. And it's amazing. This is at the peak of the peace process, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to be, their chance to show that they really want peace. And they chose to shoot rockets on Jewish towns and the cities in the surrounding of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
The second stage, at the time I was at the camp, was Sharon's decision to completely disengage, which means to kick out 6,000 Jews from their homes.
What year was
and
that?
Connect. That was in 2006.
Okay.
And connect Gaza to Egypt. Now, At the time I was at the camp, we heard about it. The chief of staff heard about it in the news. We heard about the decision to disengage in the news.
Really?
It's inconceivable. Listen, I mean, this is you ask me about things that are different between the States and Israel. I'm sure that decision making in the States doesn't go this way.
Well,
Hopefully, I don't know. Who knows?
A lot of people found out they were fired over the last 4 years from a tweet. So, I mean,
yeah.
But nothing that big. No, that's true. I mean, that is correct. There's no way that our military commanders.
What I'm telling you now, I told this story for the first time in prime time in Israel a week ago while there were rocket shooting in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
And everybody in Israel was shocked because listen to what I'm telling you now. A week later, there was a cabinet meeting. And in the cabinet meeting, Sharon said, I was sitting there. He said, okay, I decided to disengage. Tell me, what's your assessment? What will happen? And the chief of staff told him, listen, if you just leave Gaza like this while they're shooting rockets from the cities and all this situation, and you connect them to Egypt, in 1 year, Gaza will become Hamastan, Al-Qaedastan, and Hezbollahstan, meaning the land of Hamas, the land of Hezbollah, and the land of Al-Qaeda. Then he asked the same question to the head of the Shin Bet, was Dichter at the time, answered the same question. And still he decided to go forward with this plan. We disengaged from Gaza. Gaza got connected to Egypt. There is a 15 kilometers, that's something like 9 miles border between Gaza and Egypt. And these 9 miles, through them, an endless amount of munition, know-how, terrorists, scientists from Iran are flowing all the time since then into Gaza. And this is how you have tens of thousands of rockets, tunnels, anti-tank missiles, drones, everything inside. The Iranians are investing billions in the Hamas. And in this reality, till now, the IDF couldn't stop this process because we're outside. They are connected to Egypt. And they're all the time continuously improving their capabilities from time to time.
And so does that mean that your answer to my question is that you don't have a lot of hope for how long the ceasefire lasts?
So I will say this. Basically, we had 2 choices, both of them bad. One is very bad and one is bad. There is no good choices in this situation. One choice was conquering Gaza. Obviously, it's something we can do. We can conquer Gaza and we can destroy all the capabilities. We did that when we took over again areas in Judah and Samaria because we had the same problem there. But conquering Gaza, we think it's not a good idea for many reasons. One of them is that the IDF needs to be prepared mostly for the Iranian threat. We are very worried about what's going on with Iran, the race for nuclear weapons. We are worried about the fact that maybe sanctions will be lifted and they will use the money again to terrorize the whole Middle East and destabilize it. We are worried about the northern border, Hezbollah, which is much bigger than Hamas, Syria. So going into Gaza and operating there, it seems to us that it's not a good solution. What the IDF did now is destroyed basically, I would say like 80%, maybe more of the capabilities Hamas has. Their infrastructure, it was very effective. The IDF showed amazing intelligence, very good work of the Air Force and Navy, and a good defense that basically didn't manage to do anything along the border. But now it's the big question, what now? And what we suggest, my organization, I founded a year ago a new organization called Israel's Defense and Security Forum. In Hebrew, it's called HaBithonisti. And today, 2,000 Israeli high-ranking officers, commanders, operators joined this organization, and it's growing by day, every day. And we are a very, very dominant voice today in Israel. What we said, listen, this time we don't need an agreement. We don't need any understandings between us and Hamas. We need an open ending, which means at the moment we finished our missions, we are stopping to shoot. They obviously want to stop because they're pretty much hurt. And now we're going to hunt every single commander of the high-ranking commanders of Hamas, which ordered shooting 4,000 rockets on Israel. I think these guys need to be on the run. I think that these guys should be taken out. And we need to do something completely different from what we did till now. We need to work like we do in Syria. If they try to build forces again, we need to keep destroying their capabilities. We cannot let once more a situation where in 5 years they will have 50,000 rockets. And then what might happen is, and it almost happened, by the way, that we won't deal only with Hamas or inner insurgents, but our overall war also with Hezbollah and Iran. And we're not far away from that. So we need a different approach. It's not about conquering Gaza, but it's about really pinpointing the leaders, because these guys, you know, people say in Gaza that people don't have anything to lose and this is what they're fighting. But the guys who decide the decisions there, they are all millionaires. They fly in private jets. This is the greatest startup ever. Terror for millions of dollars in their bank account. And these guys don't really want to die. They have no problem sending others to die.
Do you think, talking about the millions of dollars, one of the conflicts we have in the U.S. is whether we should pause or not the aid to Fatah, the Palestinian Authority? President Trump stopped it. Biden has reinstated it. You know, do you think that money is going to some of these operations, some of these terrorist operations?
Half of the money, or even more, that Fatah gets goes to payment to terrorists and their families. And it's also for the terrorists in Gaza. This money is used to pay all these terrorists that were killed now in Gaza. Their families will get payment from the U.S. money that you are sending to Fatah in Ramallah.
What is different about, there's been some reporting that IDF took a somewhat different approach. There was a really interesting deception operation that happened that got Hamas fighters into some tunneling systems. And, that was, being put out in the news that there was going to be some kind of invasion. I mean, can you walk through that? How has the IDF learned over time, and what was different about this operation?
Many things. First of all, I think that in the IDF today there is a digital revolution. The ability to process information and to distribute it very, very fast and very relevant information, even to the level of company commander, certainly to all the tools that shoot, the Air Force, Navy, they all share, they are interconnected, they are sharing information. The intelligence itself improved dramatically. Listen, the fact that we were able to reveal all the tunnels all the underground tunnels exactly where they are in all of the Gaza and destroy all of them. We destroyed 150 kilometers of tunnels, which is pretty meaningful. They built it for years. They invested $3.5 billion to build these tunnels, and this was destroyed in 10 days. Now, they felt that these tunnels are their safe haven. They felt really that they have a place they can be safe, all these terrorists. So what the IDF did, we brought some ground forces. We operated as if we are maneuvering. Their drill is at that moment to go into the tunnels. And then once they went in, not all of them, unfortunately, but a certain amount of terrorists, 150 planes orchestrated one attack on these tunnels, and they collapsed with the terrorists inside.
Interesting.
So,
one of the conversations we have in the U.S., I don't think it really goes anywhere, but the idea of universal service, and we look to countries like yours. Colombia also has universal service. A lot of people get out of it, but how does that, as a commander? So you're a lifelong commander, and you've got a lot of people that are coming in for just that 2-year stint. And now it's hard to compare to the U.S. because you're a tiny, tiny country compared to how many people we would have if we were to do that. But I'm always curious just as a military guy. I don't necessarily want people to work for me who don't want to be there. Do you ever run into that, or is the culture just so well attuned to this mandatory service that it just works?
I think that the strongest thing we have in the IDF is the fact that the most talented, resourceful, intelligent people in Israel join the army. Mm-hmm. And this is huge, because when they join for 3 years, you have 3 years to convince them to go to officers' course and to choose a military life, and you are choosing from the best of the best the country has. So I think that in discussions I had with different armies in the world, maybe this was the main problem, that when it's only professional army, and people choose it as a profession, and many times, some people do it because of values and people in service and so on, and some people say, I don't know, I can't find another job, I might just join the military, and many very talented people don't go to the military.
Yeah,
but in
that's
Israel,
a good point.
They do. In Israel they do, and the level of the people is incredible. When I finished 30 years of army, and they said to me, okay, 30 years, summarize it in one sentence. What's the most meaningful thing you can say about your service? What I said was the endless amount of talent that I saw in this 30 years. It's inspiring, and it's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. One of the things we want to take a step out of, the tactical ground situation, what's been going on, is and you've mentioned it a couple of times, the issues with Iran and your fear that Iran is racing to a bomb, and your fear that sanctions might be lifted, and that that they will then fund terrorism around the Middle East, just like they did last time. Your intelligence showed that. Our intelligence showed that. It was fairly obvious. We don't want that to happen again. I guess one question would be: are they already doing it? And the reason they might already be doing it is because there was indications from our administration that they might lift those sanctions. They haven't done it yet, but certainly they're signaling that they're open to it. Is that a problem? Does that embolden them? Does that lead to additional supplies, funneled toward groups like Hamas and Hezbollah?
Of course. First of all, we have to understand the Iranians. The Iranians are completely committed to have nuclear weapons. everything they are doing is deceiving the West, is lying. We've seen it from the moment the former agreement was signed. Already when it was signed, they were cheating and, building new installations and so on. Look, no country in the world would suffer such heavy sanctions for so long.
For nuclear power.
and still insist that they are, on their way. I mean, any normal country, just the world sanctions would stop if they don't mean it.
Right. No, that's so true. I mean, nuclear power is nice, but it ain't that nice. I mean, for them to claim like, no, we want it this bad that we're willing to suffer the sanctions. It's a really great point. It just doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they are in a stage where they have only $4 billion left. Okay, this is actually the breaking point, and it's the second time that when the Iranians actually get to a break point, comes an administration and saves them.
Yeah.
I mean,
is it naive? I don't get it.
No, I don't get it either, and I can tell you that the Sunni Arab world feels betrayed, and they feel this is an existential threat, and they feel that the only country they can rely on today is Israel in this sense, and this is why, by the way, they are inclined to sign peace agreements with Israel and get closer and have a greater cooperation. And Iran, these are bad guys, that they build the Hezbollah. They are terrorizing the Sunnis in Syria. They are terrorizing Yemen. This is not partners. I don't know why these negotiations are going on at all.
What going back to internally in Israel, maybe we'll end with this because in the last podcast I did deep dive into the differences between Fatah and Hamas and the political conflicts there and the West Bank versus Gaza. So my audience should have like a good overview of where things are in Israel. I mean, you got to look at a map. This stuff is very complex, but all of this is going on in Gaza, right? That's southwest Gaza Strip. That's where Hamas's stronghold is. What is, during all this time, has anything been going on in the West Bank where the Palestinian Authority reigns? And, this is what people commonly refer to as like the refugee camps. They're not camps, they're just neighborhoods.
Right.
But, this is where Ramallah is, the capital. What has been going on there? Has there been conflict there at all? Is it normal? What's going on?
The biggest problem we had before talking about the Fatah in Judea and Samaria is that inside Israel, within the Israeli Arab society, we had a huge level of rioters at such a big level that we haven't seen since the independence war. Really crazy, attacking Jews, pogroms in cities, and so on. Unfortunately, within the Israeli Arab society, you have a group, and it's not that small, that is very Islamistic, and these guys basically don't really recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. They are Muslim Brotherhood. They are ideologically affiliated to Hamas. And Hamas managed to really affect them in a way that they, it looked at a certain stage like we're going to some kind of civil war.
Yeah.
And what we saw is that, first of all, citizens had to defend themselves. And, you are from Texas. When I visited Texas last time, I saw nice shirts with, the state of Texas, and it says, here we don't dial 911. And in Israel, they actually dialed 911, but nobody came. So the citizens had to defend themselves. And the police was really having a hard time to control this. And now it's getting better. We're getting more control, but the lesson learned is we need much more forces talking about Homeland Security. And different balance between Homeland Security and the military overall.
So this wasn't even in the West Bank, or this is in the West Bank.
No, no, this wasn't. This was inside Israel, not in the
Okay,
West Bank.
inside Israel, and
Now,
this is while the conflict is going on. There's this additional unrest right in those neighborhoods.
yeah. So you see a connection, and it worries us because you see a connection between Arabs in the West Bank,
Mhm.
Arabs in Israel who are Israeli citizens who enjoy everything Israel has to offer, $40,000 GDP, and part of the Israeli flourishing democracy, and yet they choose to side with Hamas and Fatah. Not all of the society, God forbid, but part of them. And also with the Hamas. Now, talking about Fatah, look, Abu Mazen was supposed to hold elections a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
When he found out that he's going to lose the elections to Hamas, because the Fatah is divided into 4 different fractions, nobody believes anymore in Abu Mazen.
Just to be clear for the audience, Abu Mazen is Abu Abbas. He's the leader of Fatah, right? But in Israel, you guys all call him Abu Mazen.
Right. And basically, he's 85 years old. He has been governing the Fatah for many years. Hasn't been doing any elections. It's basically a one-man show. And once he decided once again to not have the elections, he needed to push attention somewhere else. So the usual thing happened. Immediately, it's a blood label about the Temple Mount. It's always the same thing. We always take care of keeping the status quo. When they want to start attacking, what they do, they send rioters to the Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. They start rioting and throwing stones. Then the police needs to go into the Temple Mount to restore law and order, because it's a place of prayer. And then they say the Jews are taking over the Temple Mount and so on. And from there onwards, that's it. I mean, incitement and...
And this time there was weapons being stored in Al-Aqsa Mosque, too.
Yeah, too. I mean, rocks, weapons, Molotov bottles, and so on. And I don't know, it's such a sacred place. I don't see how they really believe it's sacred when they behave like that.
It's hard to say. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time and helping us with some insight here. Look, we've got a lot of misinformation to correct in the U.S. You see the demonstrations. There was one in Houston for pro-Palestinian demonstrations. We have a member of Congress who is far more passionate about the Palestinian cause than her own constituents in Michigan, Rashida Tlaib. And she's also a liar. I mean, a full-on liar, and constantly presents lies to make her case. It's fascinating how these narratives have spread so wide and deep, and young, naive people are very susceptible to this because they love victims. They want to, and I'm giving them a lot of grace here. The best side of humanity is rallying around a disenfranchised victim, but there's been a false narrative surrounding this for a long time, and it's just important to educate people on it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, basically, Palestinians are completely ruling themselves. It's the Palestinians who chose a terror organization to lead them in Gaza, although we completely disengaged from there. They control the whole land. They could have been Singapore long ago.
Yeah.
Yet they chose a terror organization and they chose to continue fighting. And the reason is simple. These guys want everything. They simply don't want Jews to exist. That's the story.
Well, that's a good question. So somebody on the other side would say, no, you're keeping them in a prison, right? That's what Rashida Tlaib says. They say that Gaza is a prison. You're keeping them there. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a completely false argument, because first of all, Gaza is connected to Egypt. How can it be a prison? I mean, they have a border with Egypt and it's open. We're not controlling this border. We're controlling our border. Yeah. The only thing we are doing is that since there is an endless amount of weapons pouring into Gaza, The sea, we try to control that at least through the sea, these weapons arrive through the sea to Gaza. But basically, a ship can come to El Arish, like a few miles from Gaza, bring to El Arish anything they want, and then take it into Gaza through Egypt. And it's really sad, by the way, considering the fact that we have peace with Egypt, that endless amount of capabilities are all the time moving from Egypt into Gaza. This is what's going on. So they are completely open to the world. We are not controlling Gaza in this sense. And they are connected to Egypt. And the other thing is that, listen, we gave the area. They were supposed to simply live in peace. They chose to be a terror state with tens of thousands of rockets. And we need to defend ourselves against that. So, we're doing the best we can to defend ourselves. They are the aggressors, and we are defending ourselves.
Well, good talk. General, thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's good and informative episode. People will love it. Appreciate it.